Okay. So welcome everybody. We kind of let most people in a bit earlier just because Jesse's a ton of fun to talk to about what's going on in sort of the skunk works that they have in Washington there. But welcome to our Doc Swinson's tasting, which has been a few months to get planned and get going here. We were waiting for a KWM cast to arrive, and that's arrived now. And Harmony has been patiently stashing away some Doc Swinson's bottles as we've been going through stuff. Even since before, I think we went to on our Washington trip to meet everybody, eh? But we have with us Jean Vite of Evergreen Beverage, who has been super wonderful and arranged a trip for us to go down and helped connect us with an awesome cast that we're happy to have. And also we have with us Jesse Parker from Doc Swinson's. So I think this should be a fun lineup. Jesse set the lineup for us just, I think, more based on narrative as much as anything else. Eh, Jesse?
Yeah, more or less a narrative. The only thing I might try and change up if it's not too much of an issue, I
Yeah,
might swap L'Esprit and do that before the Pineau. Uh,
sounds good.
I was a little rushed in my thought there, and I went through and collected every single of the exact releases that you have so I could pair my releases with yours identically. And I realized that this particular L'Esprit is not the one I was thinking, and this one's a much higher proof than the one I was thinking it was. So it'd be good to swap them, I believe.
Yeah, no worries.
Yeah, this will give you a full kind of lineup. Um, nice representation of what we do here at Doc Swinson's. And then, of course, we get to dive into the star of the show, which is our barrel pick that we did together.
Yeah,
Uh,
absolutely.
and then top it off with a little bit of a funky dessert. So
Yeah.
that'll be exciting.
Yeah. So Jesse, before we jump into things, or maybe actually while we're tasting Alter Ego, just so everybody can get a sip of something as well. Um, you want to tell us how Doc Swenson's and Distiller's Way kind of got started and how you
Yeah.
guys got to where you're at now?
Yeah, so I know I don't necessarily look like any kind of master blender or anything, is what I've realized. Because most people, when I show up in markets, will be like, "Oh, you're like the understudy of some sales rep or whatever," which I totally understand. Nope, that's me. I'm the master blender of Doc Swinson's. I'm one of the founders, brand creators, and graphic designer slash plant engineer here at Doc Swinson's. Um, and some of you were probably on before we really got this going, but I was saying something about how busy it's been lately because the other side of our company and where we really started wasn't Doc Swinson's. We didn't get together, a small group of us who run the company. We didn't get together with the intention of developing a whiskey brand. That's not at all what we did. We got together 8 years ago to develop private label projects for other companies. Kind of the least sexy side of this, I'll be honest. But it is really fun. And what that afforded me to be able to do was go and learn from master blenders, distillers, people that are wicked, way more smart than I am in this industry, and adapt their methods to American whiskey the way I thought would be fun. So that's really the origin story, is developing other people's products. Most of this was, rums, whiskeys, a lot of Canadian whiskey actually. So hey,
Hmm.
fair amount of rum projects, anything from, upwards of 30 years old all the way down to new make. A lot of vodka flavored products. So I've worked in a fair amount of different sides of the spirits industry in that regard, developing products for grocery store conglomerates more than anything. So while we were doing that, though, we found a love for, of course, brown spirits, in particular American whiskeys, because, well, that's where we're from, and we ended up finding ourselves working on a lot of um, bourbon brands. And so us founders, so there's three of us at the time, plus a couple investors, but really the three of us who actually did daily operations and developed these things got together and said, "Hey, let's buy some barrels," and that's what we did. So in 2015, we ended up buying 10 barrels. This was from what is now called MGP, but at the time, all the barrels that they were selling still said Seagrams on it. So all my barrels, original barrels, had Seagrams on it. And they're 10-year-old whiskeys at a price that it would blow your mind today for the prices back then. They're basically take what you want, offer us a price, and you'll probably end up getting it. Which, trust me, is not the way this industry works anymore. The last couple of years, it's been a totally flip on its head here. Anyway, so we bought these first 10 barrels, and I started playing around with the idea of blending them and releasing them mostly as just a couple single barrels and a couple small batch blends, because what do you have when you have 10 barrels? Not a lot of bottles in the end. And we started releasing those in Washington State, where we're based. So we're based here in the Northwest. Honestly, I'm about 40 minutes from Vancouver, Canada. So closer to that than Seattle. So pretty common visitor. And we started getting this really good feedback on these blends. We thought, okay, well, let's just scrape a little bit of the cream off the top of profits and start working towards barrels. And we did all this under the what do you call it? Like, I guess we did this away from our investors because they didn't really want us doing this, because it was hard to convince them to sit on barrels for so long and create these unique blends. They wanted volume, baby, volume, and that's what we really were built for. And eventually, a couple years of playing around, we started getting feedback that was so positive that our investors decided to let us do what we actually really wanted to do, which is develop a whiskey brand of our own. And in that time, so this was about 2015 to about 2020, I started working on some ideas. How do we differentiate ourselves from our competitors? And that's because we're not a distillery, right? We're an NDP, a non-distilling producer. So we're relying on distillers' products. In this case, like 98% of it anymore is MGP, as being our primary partner. And I'll go through what they have available, and we also contract to still new make from them as well. And then I bring it to my facility. So the question is, you all have probably tried a lot of MGP in your lives, right? You're all whiskey.
Oh, yeah.
You're here, right? So have you tried Doc Swinson's? Have you all tried Doc Swinson's? Cool. Okay, some of you have. So great. What do you think, those of you who have tried it, in comparison to some other MGP? And you don't have to say it's better or worse. You just be like, yeah, I think you guys do well, or no, your stuff is terrible. I don't know why you're here then, but
I think it's awful. I'm just here to watch the pain. I've had I've got an alter ego on my shelf right now, and I had the Blender's Cut was my first introduction to you guys, and I was really, really impressed. And I looked at it and I saw the Indiana. I'm like, oh, it must be NGP. And like, I have no problems with people who like source or whatnot, because that's the kind of like the easy part of making whiskey is distilling it. It's what kind of magic you can create afterwards, and you guys have been doing a bang up job for the ones I've tried, anyways.
dude, thank you for that testimony. Seriously, because that's exactly the point. And you said exactly what I rarely hear in the industry, which is what matters the most. Honestly, is what comes after distillation, in my opinion, as a blender. Because the reality is, why would you pick a single barrel if it all tasted the same? There's no reason. So all these barrels are unique and different. So what do you do with them is what matters later. Most distilleries will tell you that somewhere between 60 and 80% or so of the profiles come from the oak itself. So why wouldn't we focus more on maturation? And that's exactly the goal of what I wanted to do, is how do I focus on maturation in 2 different climate zones, 3 too, because we also age some of our stuff in Kentucky, because that's where warehouse space is sometimes more available. And how long do I want them in those areas before I bring them to Washington and then continue to age a certain set of those casks, or finish them here? So all that's done in the building behind this wall that direction, which I'll try and log in on my phone and I can give you all a tour. I've never done that before, but I think, Evan, you asked if we could maybe do that.
Yeah, I think I mean, Harmony and I just felt spoiled after spending the day with you guys and Gene. And a little hungover the next day, perhaps as well. But the amount of just crazy casks you guys have in your warehouse is just, it made for a fun hangout, that's for sure, if nothing else. But I wanted to get Harmony to maybe chime in on this, because and Gene, because it was originally Harmony that turned me on to Doc Swinson's, and Gene had been talking about him with both of us before that, but Harmony was the one that really sort of like put the bug in my ear and was like, oh, you got to try this stuff. This is really good. And Harmony, how did that come about for you?
Well, I bought the blender's cut. After Gene and I talked, he was really passionate about them, and I had voiced to him that I'd been struggling finding new bourbons that I was excited about, because they were always echoing these like 3 core flavors that were found in every bourbon. And I was just like, okay, Gene, if you're excited about them, like we'll bring in the blender's cuts and see how it goes. And so of course, like I love bourbon, so I had to buy it. And I think I may have even messaged him on Instagram at some point throughout the bottle and was like, this is so good. It's not just like maple, cherry, and oak spice. Like there's depth and complexity. And I ended up buying the rye because I love the rye, and the rye was so different than the Canadian ryes. And I say that lightly. But it was also unique and set apart from the Indiana Rise, which I had enjoyed. So I knew that whatever you were doing with your finishes was special, and then insisted on bringing in every exploratory cask I could get my hand on, just to try them. And yeah, I think by the time our cask arrived, I had 8, 9, or 10 bottles of Doc Swinson squirreled away in the back of the store, to the point where we had too many for a tasting where it would be safe to serve, like 10 samples. So I had to pick and choose like how we could put this together and showcase what you do.
Yeah, I guess we're saving up for round 2 at this point.
Yeah.
Yes, yes. Well,
Yeah.
don't worry, there's a lot of cool things coming out, so we'll have to get on that call. But I apologize, my manners. We're drinking the first one now, right?
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
so we can go into more background and chaos about Doc Swinson's, where it came from. But in a nutshell, how do we make our MGP whiskey taste different than everybody else's? And I think some of the benefit of not being from the industry, I'm not from the spirits industry previously, and my family's not, I should say, because I started in the industry when I was 21, and so it's been, gosh, 11 years now. And more or less my background in research and studying was in brandy distillation, actually. So a lot of what I do is employed from the brandy industry, as well as just obsession in manufacturing history for wines and other whiskeys of the world. So that in steps. In 2020, we released this 15-year Kentucky bourbon blend, and a lot of people ended up with these same barrels, right? And our blend, for some reason, often won in blind tastings over and over and over again. And that's where we started building a name for Doc Swinson's, really, was in 2020. So once we ran out of these barrels, we had to figure out what in the heck we were going to follow it up with. And that's where this product that we're tasting right now, Doc Swinson's Triple Cask, comes into play. We took a sharp right turn into saying we're going to be a company that focuses on finishing MGP whiskeys and elevating it to a different level that people probably haven't quite seen the same way. And so when we sat down to figure out what that looks like, it was what is important to us? Honesty and transparency in our brand. So if you go to our website, for example, we'll tell you everything about each and every single release, as long as we have time to put it on the website. So ask any questions you want to while I'm here. So transparency. And then we still want the whiskey to shine. We thought that was important with finishing casks. We went and tried a lot of different finished products out there, and a lot of them are really wonderful for their own reasons. We wanted to focus on how do we make finishing approachable for more people that were interested in this, but not quite sure about it. And what I mean by that is we still wanted to taste like the whiskey. And we felt like that was something that was kind of missing in a lot of the products that we ended up trying, is it focused like very heavily on the finish cask. So instead, when you make a really good, dish at home of food, what do? Do you focus too heavily on salt and pepper? No, you focus on the ingredients. That's what matters. So to our point, the steak is the star of the show, not its seasonings, but the seasonings are what elevate it to a level that's that much more exciting or approachable. And that's essentially in a nutshell what Doc Swinson's is. So Triple Cask, the one you're tasting right now, is a blend of 2 different bourbon whiskeys. It's both MGP mash bills of their 21% rye and their 36% rye, so high rye bourbon, aged for a minimum of 5 years, up to 7 years, that's been finished in Cognac, Oloroso sherry, and Pedro Jimenez sherry casks. And these aren't just any casks. These are casks that generally are large format, so 500 to 600 liter. And they've been typically used for at least 20 years in their previous production origins. So in sherry or Cognac, for example. And that was all important aspects because it has a huge effect on how the whiskey takes on the characteristics. Large format is a lot more gentle. We're also in a location here up in the Pacific Northwest where it's almost identical to parts of Scotland. So we have very similar, we're also on the sea, we're very similar aging style as you would find in a lot of Scotland. So we figured it was also perfect for finishing because after all, that's what a lot of Scotch whiskeys go through that process as well, finished or long-term aging. So dual climate's been really nice for us.
Yeah, that's kind of what struck me about Doc Swinson's along the way is you're right that like on the Scotch whiskey side of things, we've seen it a lot, and we've seen it on the bourbon side of things too, because as you probably understand, like trying to differentiate yourself from the vast amount of bourbon companies out there is difficult. And a lot of the time what you do is you get some really young bourbon and then get hyper aggressive on what you do to it. And there sometimes it works, which is cool, but a lot of the time it's just disjointed and jarring and overpowered or what have you. And there's always been this sort of like quirky elegance to a lot of the Doc Swinson stuff that I've tried, where it's like, oh, I never thought those two casks would go together like that, but that's really cool. And it brings out something else in the bourbon that I wasn't expecting, which is neat. And that's what really excites me about it, and seeing what else you guys are up to, because in the time we were down there where it was just a marathon of try this cask, try that cask, try this bottle that we just did. And trust me, we weren't turning it down. But it just blew me away how everything was still bourbon at the end of the day, but you found a way to make MGP bourbon your own.
Yeah, I mean, no, thank you. I honestly can't even say it nearly as well as you can. I'm still working on my marketing points, right? No, that was exactly it. And we very commonly get that kind of comment on our products as well. In fact, a lot of people don't even realize it is MGP, which is really interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Nothing bad about it. MGP makes great juice. We wouldn't start with it if we didn't agree with that. We've never taken whiskey barrels that we thought were subpar, even based on extremely good age statements that we know we can get money for in the market. We've rejected them because it didn't fit what we wanted for our brand. I mean, for example, I was even offered about a year ago some bourbon that was 26 years old and from a really reputable distillery and everything like that. And honestly, I got samples of it. And I'm like, I know we could turn around and sell these bottles for $600 a piece in the United States. It would totally warrant it because there's only a few of these barrels that exist. And you know what? We said no. Once we got the sample, I was like, it's good, but it's not that good. Honestly, I preferred triple cask over it, you know, and this is something I know somebody else bought and they bottled and sold it somewhere. So it's just one of those things. It goes to show, I think we have a lot of integrity and intentionality behind our brand, and that's what we care about the most. And I think we're fortunate at Doc Swinson's to all share in that identity here and not be pushed by sometimes quick financial gains or investors that don't care. They all really care. We all care. And that goes to show like what we're producing. Hence why it's all pretty good. And if we don't like it, we won't bottle it. I have a couple of those.
That's right. So shall we, while we're talking, shall we move on to the blender's cut?
Yes, and it's the perfect segue into what we last drank. So triple cask is what we really launched Doc Swinson's with, right? And so this was back in 2020, as far as what we decided Doc Swinson's was going to be. So this is back in 2020, and even in 2020, there was still quite a bit of, oh, the only reason why you'd finish a whiskey is because it wasn't very good whiskey. We kept hearing that comment over and over again. It wasn't that our finished whiskey was bad. It's just that's what we'd see on, like, you know, whatever, Reddit, different people complaining, or just people in the market that just weren't willing to try and accept finished whiskeys yet. So the goal was to showcase what the base of our finished whiskey was. And that's where Blender's Cut came into play. I wanted to create Well, one, it is exactly the base of the last whiskey we drank. So you get to have the direct translation, but at cask strength. I wanted to give the market an example of what we are capable of doing in blending. So once again, this is a blend of 2 bourbons, minimum 5 years old. And it's the 2 very bourbons that are used in triple cask, but at cask strength of 115 proof. And I employ a pretty unique blending process to all my whiskeys. And this one's actually blended to 115 proof based upon a set of golden ratios that I work with, which gets really complicated. But in a nutshell, I finalized, I think we talked about this a little bit ago. And in a nutshell, we have basic profiles to each cask when I taste them. And what I do is I assign the most simple profile to that cask. So that might fit 5 or 6 categories, typically, depending on if it's rye or bourbon. And then I have my ratio of those categories that come together to create Blender's Cut or Bottle and Bond Rye or you name it, right? And those are the straight bourbons. So that's where Blender's Cut was born from. And I knew that would be a really great position, or this was going to be a great position to finish. And it just so happens to work in a lot of my finishing casks. Not all of them. We do blend them different for each one, usually. But some it works incredibly well with just as is. And triple cask was one of them. So those cognac and sherry casks.
I love that, like apricot kind of like stone fruit on the palate that comes through on this. Like it's just really beautiful. And like the dark chocolate that seems to be, I mean, correlating between the two is just right up my alley for sure.
Yeah, I'm a big apricot fan, and chocolate's my favorite thing in the world. So you can see where a lot of me comes out into my whiskeys. Also, it's based on kind of a lot of it like where I grew up and live, I think. So that I think had an impact on the profiles that we're working with and the background more or less in brandy.
Yeah, for me, it's the apricot I get is as like a peach and peach pit note, which isn't too far away. And then it's got this interesting starchiness that I get on some bourbons as well, where you're getting into some maybe like root vegetable notes in there. Not as heavy as some Heaven Hill and Jim Beam product, but it's there in the background.
Yeah, I found that more so on the first one. It was like that kind of thick, heavy peanut skins, like that dryness that comes off your like kind of cheap bar peanuts.
Yeah.
Yeah, awesome.
Pardon.
Yeah, that combination again of Grape Crush is a good call. Thirst Responder. It does go into a little bit of that Grape Crush note, and again that combination of cherries and spice on the finish is just lovely.
Thank you. No, Blender's Cuts. I mean, it was my namesake. I originally tried naming it. Actually, Steve Main, my head of sales, tried getting me to name it Parker's Reserve, but we had some legal issues with that one. So
What with putting Parker on a bottle? That's
something
shocking.
like that. To be fair, it's my last name too.
Yeah.
It doesn't. No, it just got Blender's Cut. Anyways, once again, this is the base spirit that went into triple cask. So you can actually see how we developed the profile between the two. So I figured you all have water at home. If you wanted to, you can always water it down to the same proof point as triple cask and actually see another kind of relationship develop in that way. That's another thing that's really important here is proof points. For example, triple cask was 95.8 proof. Blender's Cut's 115. In general, proof points matter a whole lot. I'm sure you all know that. You add a little bit of water to it, it completely changes those profiles. When it comes to picking proof points, that's something that we take a pretty long process in doing, especially when it comes to ones that we want to stick with the proof point. So in overall average, we'll say these are the profiles we're getting. What proof is best for these profiles that we are trying to exhibit here? And 115 just happened to work for Blender's Cut. 95.8 happened to work for triple cask. And that's an overwhelming majority when we go to taste them, saying, okay, this proof point we like the most. Because once again, sometimes a half a proof will make a big difference in the overall profile you're getting out of whiskey.
Yeah, that's one thing I noticed about your exploratory casks is there's no set proof on anything that you do, which I'm okay with, because I agree, like one drop of water can make a big difference. And if you're going to be creating a product that you specifically release at 0.2 or 0.7 for that reason, like I'm all down to try it and see why, versus doing everything the same way just for volume's sake.
Yep. I mean, that's pretty common, I think, too, is like finding that you're like, oh, why did you pick this proof point? Well, because it worked for I get it
That's
for
right.
working for the budget, but it's like you just picked it for an arbitrary reason. It's like, what about the flavors? That's the whole point of this process, is what about the flavors?
I was just going to ask Gene on this. Is like, Gene, does it bother you that you have to register a new SKU every single time you get a Doc Swinson's product?
I'm so sorry.
No, not at
Worth
all,
it, right?
because it's 100% worth it.
Yeah.
I will quickly just tell you guys, the Blender's Cut is what put Doc Swinson's on the map in Canada. Our first year, we ordered 3 times from Doc's for the Blender's Cut. And I think it was last year, we took that entire volume and ordered it in the very first quarter, just on its own because of how good it is. So yeah, at Blender's Cut, like you could change one every other month and it's not an issue.
That's
not coming from you guys, Jessica. You know that.
So, I really appreciate that. I know you could respect that, and I do feel a little bad for doing it. In fact, if it makes you feel any better, it's worth it, but it's also caused a lot of problems on the labeling side on my end. So I put a lot of work into these. Like I said, I develop all the labels myself. In fact, it caused us to make a decision to buy a laser that actually caramelizes the paper or shaves the ink off, depending on if it's a black label or a white label, so that we can do it in line in real time, because printing it ahead of time was too much of a nightmare.
Yep.
You know what you should do, Jesse, is you should write out the in the handwriting on the label, you should write out the old ABV and then just like scratch it out and then put the new ABV down below that on a bottle.
I'm sure the TTV would love that idea.
I know.
Their labels would be so long.
Oh my gosh, it would be
That's right.
ridiculous. So just to reiterate, all these black labels, so the first 2 that we've tried so far, are core line products. They're ones that have a consistent proof point, and the idea is to have a fairly consistent profile to them as best as we can with the barrel quantities that we dump. And keep in mind, we're still pretty small batch. I mean, the largest batches we do are around 45 barrels, and that's for our session blend, which is our 90 proof bourbon main producer, or made for like cocktails, bars, stuff like that. It's excellent just to kick back with, because it's like half the price as the other ones. But Blender's Cut usually is somewhere around maybe 12 to 20 barrels, depending on what I'm looking for volume and flavor profile. And then my finishing cask can range anywhere from 1 cask up to about 12 in the blend. So it just depends on what I'm producing. So once again, very small batch. So all the white labels, which we'll walk into now. So the first one's going to be called L'Esprit, which is our bourbon whiskey finished in Cognac casks. And what's interesting about this one is it is also Blender's Cut, because this is one of the 3 pieces that are involved in producing triple cask. So we went from Blender's Cut, the base, finished in Cognac casks, and then this is one piece that goes into triple cask. So you can see the progression. And the reason why I wanted to release this, so there's two other siblings involved, L'Esprit, La Mente, and El Cuerpo. And that's the mind, body, and spirit. And that's making up the pieces of the puzzle to create triple cask. So if you could find all 3 of those, for example, you could make your own version of triple cask. And it's always a challenge. I'm always curious if somebody will come up with a blend better than mine. Which nice. I welcome. So anyways, and this is a cask strength for this particular release, which was 114.7 proof. That should be the one we're drinking right now. Evan, is that 22-006 release? Do you know? Do you have the bottle?
Unfortunately, I just have a little bottle in front of me, so that doesn't tell me, unfortunately.
That's the only one I have with this proof point that you gave me, so we'll go off that.
Sounds good. Yeah, this says, I put in the chat, but this has a lot more mint, menthol, and eucalyptus, like off the hops, a lot more cooling notes on the nose for me.
Yeah. Big time.
I still think, Evan, Harmony, you 2 have the best tasting notes out of anybody I've ever entertained at Doc Swinson's.
I think you just had to put up with us talking a lot more. versus other people.
Trust me, if we didn't like it that much, we'd show you the door a little quicker. And yeah.
Oh, they're legit. Evan's a published SMWS testing note member now here, so he's legit.
No way, right on. I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Yeah, it just means some other weirdos respected my weirdness, I think is what it comes down
We
to.
love your weirdness, Evan.
Yeah,
That's some of the joy in life, right?
yeah,
We're all just
that's right.
really a bunch of people that really enjoy this particular thing, and this is how we band
That's
together.
right.
Plus, there are worse things to band over. Whiskey is epic, so
So are you when you get to the separation essentially with where you've got the mind, body, spirit, are you ever surprised with what comes out individually on the casks or?
absolutely. And that's mainly because I do pick new casks from new players from time to time. So, for example, this particular release was early in the stage of Mind, Body, and Spirit. So these particular casks were all 600 liter. They were from one producer. They're used for approximately, like I said, about 20 years. And these casks, in fact, were all relatively dry when I got them. So they're producing some characteristics that are a little bit more likened to the oak more than just the cognac itself. And that's why it's pretty light on those cognac profiles. Whereas some of my next releases that or future releases I've released over the last year or so have been a little bit lower proof point, as well as more expressive types of cognac, most of them coming from the Borderies, which are just really fun, expressive cognacs. And so the challenge is, how do I keep triple cask about the same while still trying to improve every release of cognac or l'Esprit that I put on the market? So that's something we also try. I don't know if that answered your question, but in a nutshell, my main goal is, can I make something equal to my previous release, or can I best it? And I'll always try and do that, especially in the case of the exploratories, where that's the point of them, is how do I best the last one if I can, or produce something of equal quality? I don't want you ever thinking that, ooh, this one's really good and the next one, it might not work for you, but in the end, as far as it lines up with Doc Swinson goes, we want to make sure that is happening here. We want your trust in our brand.
Nice.
But yes, no, these casks are vividly different sometimes. I've had some from, like I said, 4 different regions, all producing different profiles. And the goal is to make triple casks taste the same, and then also make l'Esprit have potentially its own direction with it, if we wanted to.
This one for now, for me, like after sitting and nosing it and tasting it a bit, it's got this nice sort of background of like a wafting cigar smoke just hanging out in it. And it's I'm not a cigar smoker, but I love the aroma of it. And it's super enticing.
I was just gonna say that, Evan. I was like, I'll let him talk, but don't say my note, and then you did. Which is great, because we're on the same page and we're enjoying the whiskey. Yeah, there's definitely like that soft tobacco smoke, or even fresh tobacco for me, actually. And there's also like a slight like vegetal note in here as well for me. Which is really enjoyable. At first I thought it was radishes, but now I just think I don't know.
It's almost like you're chopping up parsley, like just fresh parsley for me right now. Thirst responder Jay says peaches and stone fruits are more prominent on this one for me. That's a really good note as well.
It's just really, really smooth for its ABV, and that oak on the finish is really nice. It balances the tannins really nicely, or the dryness, I should say. It doesn't become overly dry. It's really, really great.
Yeah, I can tell this is going to be a dangerous tasting, because usually I'm pretty conservative on my pours, and I only pour out like half of my half-ounce sample bottle on each one on your typical Scotch tasting, and then I've already gone back and poured the rest in on the 3 we've tasted so far. So
ditto.
At some point I'll start slurring more than usual.
So Evan, if you're pouring more into and going backwards, right, from time to time?
Yeah.
Do you find a pretty significant change in profile when you do that?
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
always fun to do in a
Yeah.
tasting like this. I haven't really gone into this one to do it, but I'll do that as we go along because it is really fun to see how the next one you have changes the one you just left
Yeah,
in a way.
I mean that's I think some of the hard part in blending in general, right? And just tasting and actually coming up with the proper profile. But blending,
Mhm.
especially all like casks and picking sometimes only a 0.5% of one cask over this one in
Yep.
the blend profile can significantly change it. And then going back and forth fairly quickly is always a bit of a roller coaster. More often than not, what I'll do is I'll come up with several blends, changing up the fractions how I want to, the ratios how I want to, based upon what I'm tasting then. And then what I'll do is I'll let them sit for 24 hours, retaste,
Mhm.
readjust, sit again, see how the previous ones tasted maybe, 36 hours ahead, 48 hours. And I'll keep kind of going back and forth, back and forth. And eventually I'll whittle down to what I think profile is the best for what I'm looking for. Once again, I mean, it's how do I take the inputs that I have access to and make the best whiskey possible?
The fact that you're able to remain that scientific about things is impressive because I can just picturing that. I can see myself getting to day 2 and just being like, fuck it, let's put it all together and just call it a day.
Trust me, that thought does cross my mind every once in a while. Usually when I've got other big protocols and the investors and everybody's like, hey, we got to get this project over here done. Can you blend up a gin? And I'm like, no.
Yeah.
So
It's in gin time. Yeah.
I've learned a lot about blocking out a lot of time for Doc Swinson's. It definitely eats up the most time I have, which is perfectly fine. That's where I want it to be. And it's a lot of notes. I always joke, and I'm going to butcher my own saying, but my assistant blender Garrett, who probably some of you have seen on Instagram if you follow Doc's Whiskey, he's the guy with the
He's
dreads.
awesome.
I've known him a long time. He's got great palate. He's a great person to bounce ideas off of and come up with blends. But I always tell him, what is it? Blends are no good if you don't keep track of the math. So
Mhm.
the whole point being is we keep a lot of detailed notes on everything. Everything
Yeah,
gets
that's good.
cataloged. This is only a little portion, but I guess you could see part of my office here. Here, I'll just pull this camera up. But all these crazy IKEA, I mean, there's some tequilas in there for fun, some other stuff I like drinking on top. But all these bottles, like, I guess, yeah, I can't do this. There,
Yep.
those ones, these ones, the ones over here, down over here, and there's a whole nother wall over there. And also I have, this camera's a little stiff. I have a whole other room over there just full of samples, and it's every step of the process.
Yeah.
And eventually sometimes I kind of whittle through them because it's a little, we have so much limited space, but I can showcase every single part, at least on paper, of each blend I came up with and why I decided to move a certain direction. Now, is it
Cool.
always useful for the future? Nah, maybe not, but it's kept track of, so we make sure what ends up in the bottle is exactly what we want.
And
Right
it's
on.
exciting for people like us that get to walk into that room and you go, hey, you
That's
didn't
right.
say anything. Woohoo!
Exactly. No, it's a fun process. Just a lot of notes.
Mhm.
College
Well,
taught
let's
me that, I guess.
while we're chatting here, let's go on to Pinot Charentes,
Yeah,
which
so
is there's not a lot of Pinot Charentes cask finishes that I can find out there.
no, which is such a shame. It's one of my favorite things. I fell in love with it in my early 20s, when I was
Mhm.
running a little baby brandy distillery, and somebody from France gave me a little bottle basically, and I fell in love with it. And um, so it's also one of those oddballs out there because it's hard to find. I don't know about where you're all located, but it's kind of hard to find Pinot de Charente in general.
Yeah.
It's not something you can commonly find, by going to any liquor store here. In most of the states I've been, unless it's a specialty shop, like a wine shop might have it, but it might be one. Pinot de
Yeah.
Charentes are pretty common actually in France. They're all over the place. Primarily from Cognac distillers that it's their like their tasting room pour. It's what generally regionally people are drinking as an aperitif or digestive. Um, and I think one of the most fascinating things is it's technically classified as a fortified wine, but more often than not,
Mhm.
it's never fermented. More often
Oh,
than
so they're just adding grape juice to brandy essentially.
Yeah, exactly. And then so in the case
Yeah.
of a Pinot Blanc, so its legal requirement is 18 months in the barrel. Pinot Rouge is I could be wrong, but I think it's 14 months, but it might be 12 months. I don't work with those very much. And mine tend to be between 8 and 12 years old in the barrel. And then this next round that'll come out some point in time in the future is 23-year-old in the barrel, which is pretty cool. That'll be really unique. It's displays some of those rancio characteristics you get in a really nice old cognac. But in a nutshell, yeah, it's juice mixed with brandy. Sometimes it's partially fermented, but not as commonly. And it just really displays this gorgeous, like, fresh pressed grape profile. So you get a lot of like golden raisin, a little bit of pepperiness from some of the cognac that comes through on the back end. And it's kind of citrusy and honeysuckly, in my opinion. It's one of my favorite fortified wines, and I love working with them. And it's a shame there should be more Pinot de Charente finishes out there. But honestly, getting the barrels is not that easy, so I get it.
Yeah. Have you ever had or experimented with the Ratafia?
So I've had it. I've never used it in finishing or anything like that. Yeah. Ratafia, that would be a fun one. Why do you bring that one up specifically? I'm curious.
Just we actually have a pretty good relationship with a gentleman named Gilles Dumagen of Champagne Dumagen, and he makes Ratafia as well, and then he actually sources bourbon and Scotch and different whiskeys from around the world, and then finishes it in his Ratafia casks. It's pretty interesting stuff.
Oh my gosh, we gotta talk more. I'm curious about that.
Yeah.
I mean, part of the joy in doing this is just exploration, right? I mean,
Totally.
half the time I'm coming up with this stuff in a vacuum. I mean, I've definitely released stuff that I don't think anybody else has ever released, as far as the combination of casks, or if they have, it was vividly different than the cask that I had. And I think that's really neat. And the stranger it can get, there's always a market for it. And I don't know, it keeps me entertained, I can tell you that.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, remind me later. It'd be cool to get you guys connected. Yeah.
Just make a note right here.
Yeah, there's like so much honey on this for me.
Yeah.
Little bit of like lilac or notes, like a little bit of floral in here, lots of pepper, and like even deeper red fruits, plums and raisins, and in that way. You said golden fruits, but it seems a little darker to me.
Yeah, that's most of the bourbon coming off in there too, and playing with it. In my opinion, that's usually where I get those darker fruit qualities, or red fruits.
Yeah.
So it's a really nice mashup of both. And I think because we have the 110.8 proof one, right?
I think that's right.
3.
Yeah, so that's a more 23-03, which released, which was that's the most recent release too, which is pretty cool. So it's been my favorite release of Pineau, and it's been one of our house favorites as well.
It's got this really nice toastiness that comes off, like you mentioned raisins, and it's just like raisin breads toast with cinnamon on it, or even going into like something like a churro stylistically, where you get the cinnamon, but like the sweetness with a bit of savoriness to it as well.
Oh, and I'm thinking like the other way, like it's more like a toasty, heartier bread and spices. Like I mean,
like
I
really
get
dense
corn bourbon, but more like rye bread even.
Yeah. Maybe we meet in the middle and we just call it those Raincoast crisps.
Those are so good too.
Yeah.
I love it.
I put in the comment, it's a lower ABV than the last one, but it feels hotter.
Yeah, it's got this gorgeous spice note to it.
Sure. Yeah. I love this like butterscotch pudding in the tasting note. It reminds me of 10-Foot Henry's butterscotch pudding.
Yeah, that's good tasting note.
Yeah, like it just coats your mouth with this like thick caramel honey note, which is awesome. Yeah. I was just at the farmer's market with my friend on the weekend, and we picked up the little like honey sticks with different flavored honeys.
Nice.
And yeah, I'm glad I did that, because I'm picking it out like a raspberry.
Now that we're 4 in, I've gone back to the cognac cask. I'm just going back in order just to see if anything's changed.
Cognac feels like buttery.
Yeah, buttery, but also a little bit dusty at the same time for me. Almost like you're like it's almost like some fresh malt has just like spilled on the floor.
About that. You know what I like about these is like being from a world where I'm surrounded by predominantly Scotch drinkers. This
Yeah.
is like the
I
perfect,
thought you were gonna say men, which also
yeah.
is an acceptable answer.
I thought you were gonna say the same. I was like, oh yeah, that's yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
You also could have
yeah.
said boys, which would have been more realistic.
Yes.
Well, agreed. All of those things. Um, a lot of Scotch drinkers have possibly like outgrown bourbon or find them just not as interesting as I know my friend Cam. He said that all bourbons taste the same unless you drink them side by side. Now,
Yeah.
this is a perfect example of this not being the case, but also if
Yep.
you're a Scotch drinker where it's all about the grain and like you said, the finish comes after,
Yeah.
you do a really great job at showcasing the spirit and the finish after for at a higher ABV where it's enticing to those who've been
Yeah.
drinking spirits for a long time to come and explore something a little bit more unusual in the bourbon world.
I mean, if
Yeah.
it helps put it in perspective more, I really like Scotch, so
Mhm.
I mean, even triple cast, the back of the label, we talk specifically about almost all the labels I'll do is I talk specifically about processing methods because that's actually what I think is more important on the bottle than a story about who Doc Swinson's is, for example. Which is less relevant. It's our brand name and there's a cool story behind it, but we all banded together and thought, no, this isn't what really matters here. It's frankly I don't mean this with any disrespect, but it's another person that died a long time ago. And there's a lot of those in the bourbon world.
There are.
So we didn't really want to try and capitalize on something that really isn't that much related to us other than a locational based thing, which in the end, bourbon whiskey and American whiskey isn't really associated with the Pacific Northwest anyways. So really, we like to say Doc Swinson's is more of an ode to the prescription style label that we did with our bottle. As well as kind of the harebrained, like turn of the century experimentation that was going on, whether it was alcohol in particular, fun, or medicine, so, or both, one and the same, really. But yeah, I mean, a lot of my love is in different spirits and different alcoholic beverages or just food in general. So that's the whole idea, right? It's not just how do I make another bourbon. Because, like to your point, there's a lot of those.
As a Scotch lover as well, have you ever thought of doing your own version of the bastard mutant that is High West Campfire? Because I absolutely love that thing.
Yes, in fact, I have. I haven't wandered down that path yet. I want Doc Swinson's, I think, currently to be built off the backbone of American whiskey and be known well enough as that. And then I think we'll play a little bit more. But there's a lot of contacts that already exist. Always open to more if you have any friends over there too. But there's a fair amount of contacts. So when the time is right, I think it'll be a good time to do that as well.
Just call it Doc McSwinson's, maybe.
All right, name taken. Got it. Doc McSwinson's.
Yeah. You can use that. That one's free.
Thank you. Appreciate it. I'll send you a bottle. How about that?
Works for me.
No.
I didn't realize that there's a chat thing going on here. I apologize. I'm like the worst millennial in the world. So I just opened it up and I did see somebody a little while back said something about, do you ever blend a little bit of that other alcohol to see if there's potential? Like a few drops of tequila in a whiskey. Actually, I think that's a great question. I don't know what other people do, but I do that all the time.
Cool.
That's the most logical thing you can do when it comes to blending. I mean, yeah, a lot of the ideas are absolutely made up in my head. Sometimes they come to me in a dream, I kid you not. Sometimes it's just, oh, these are logical things because I'm tasting tequila somewhere, for example, or port or whatever. But yeah, honestly, that is the safest way to start exploring, which is just take a glass, like your Glencairn. And what I do instead of a couple drops in it, I try and mimic the barrel. So what I'll do is I'll actually put that product in the glass roll it around in there, dump all the excess out, but there's enough clinging on, especially like as far as the aromatics
Yep.
go, enough clinging on the edges of the glass, and then put my whiskey that I think would bear best with that, and then kind of roll that around. I put a watch glass on the top and I ignore it for a little while, right? And then what I'll do is I'll open that watch glass and I blow the top off it because the aromatics are all over the place. And then I let it hang out for about 30 seconds and then I taste it. And I think that tends to give me a good indication of what direction I might be trying to go. More often than not,
Cool.
that might be a little too much, but it gives you an idea. And of course, I have to do that. I have to do my due diligence before I ask my accountant to all of a sudden spend a couple $100,000 on with my crazy harebrained idea, for example. So yeah, absolutely. There's totally that is a great question. That's absolutely a way to start doing it. And that's something that's cool that any of you could do too, right? Just take any bottle, start blending them together, and really I mean, there's more nuance to it than that, but that's the starting point for certainly.
Very cool. So let's jump into Tawny Port for the next part, exploratory cask wise.
I love how jammy this nose is. It's just so full of red berries and fruit.
Yeah.
It's pretty cool. And then there's that high rye content, chocolate in there as well.
Yeah, it's kind of like a super dense black forest cake meets like a lighter berry cheesecake right now on the nose for me.
Both of you got to try this, I think, when they were sitting here, right? It was still in the barrel.
Yeah.
Yeah.
This is kind of a cool full circle, honestly. I think
Yeah.
that's awesome. When I saw this on the list, I was like, yes, I haven't made one of these in quite a long time. So I was excited to pour this one and actually go find the bottle out of the library.
Nice.
I think we tried your Gariana too before you bottled it. And what was the other one? It starts with an A.
Ambrana. Yeah.
Excuse me, the Ambrana. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. That's a whole nother ball game if you guys want to open up worms. That's awesome that you remember the Gariana. Gariana is really special and near and dear to my heart, and it's one I didn't ever really advertise that we released. And so far from the quite a few people that have gotten a hold of that bottle say this is the best thing we've ever made, which was a compliment because all those people like everything else. So, and those of you who don't know, Gariana oak only grows basically northern California to southern BC. About 100 miles within the coast, and then one little forest in Idaho for a strange reason. And so it's local to us. It literally grew in the backyard where I grew up and where I was born. They're really fickle trees, but they're somewhere between across more or less in flavor profile between American oak and French oak. And it has a lot of commonalities with Mizunara as well, which is interesting. And it's also a protected species, but so it's hard to get the barrels. The trees have to be sanctioned dead before you can do anything with them.
Very cool.
Anyway, so that was a different product. The Tawny Port. This was a fun one. This is the first release I ever did of a Tawny Port finish. I chose to do a bourbon. I just really felt like it would jive with our bourbon blending a lot more than our rye. And this one was a pleasant surprise. I felt like it just pulled out the right flavors in the right places on my tongue, and it's something I can continue to chew on over and over again. But I still need to find a good name for it.
There's a beer made by a local brewery up here called King's English, which is pale ale blended or infused with Earl Grey tea.
Oh, that's
lemon. And this is like what would happen if you distilled that beer. It almost seems like, where it's got this like top note of Earl Grey for me in a really cool manner.
I can totally see that. That's awesome. I'm gonna try this beer.
Yeah, it's a pretty good beer.
Those are all flavors I love. So
yeah.
Yeah,
this one's so chewy as well. Like, it's not like tannic and drying, but it's just big on the palate, which is really neat too.
Yeah, that big flavor just really leans into those red fruits, like crisp red apple skins, like you peeled it with a knife and then you eat it after, so you still get the juicy undertone of the apple, but that crisp tannin skin, and it just coats
Yeah, and
them.
that tartness that comes along with
Yeah.
it in a way too.
Absolutely.
And this,
I do not have any of this bottle left. I drank it very quickly. In fact, all of your bottles are like dying heels at this point. They don't last.
yeah, that's
Yeah.
I mean, that's all I have left of this
Yeah.
the Tawny too. So I'm
Mhm.
just
It's
trying to stave off the oxygen as long as I can.
I just put in one of those little bottles behind you.
I know. Don't worry. I have a couple more in the library, so we'll be all right.
Nice.
A few barrels in the warehouse, eh?
Just a couple. You know, honestly, I'm a little bummed I didn't buy more of these barrels because I only ever bought 2 of them.
Oh, really?
Yeah, so
Wow.
this is it. This is the legacy. The
And
next
were
set of
they-
Tawny, what's that?
Sorry, were they also like 20-ish or older when you bought them?
No, unfortunately, I wasn't able to verify how old these ones were. I think these ones are a bit younger. My guess is they'd be somewhere between 6 and 8 years old. And that's a relatively like educated guess. I just don't know the actual date. It's really hard to get that from a lot of producers. Most of the time, they're like, "It's a barrel. What else do you want to know?"
That's right.
We've used it in several places within production, so I don't always get the best information. But these were definitely younger barrels. They were also from, oh gosh, I'm gonna get it wrong. It's been a while since I've looked, but it's I can go find the name, but I know it remember is Valle de Perdiz. There's a word in the middle I'm missing, but that's the producer.
I don't know if we get their stuff up here.
I don't think we get in the States either, so I'm
Cool.
sure I could, like I said, find it somewhere. But they were excellent barrels. These ones were pretty dry when I got them as well. Whereas the next round of Tawny port casks I have are all 500 liter. They were used for over 40 years, and they were directly from Solera Systems.
Wow.
They all come from the same producer. These barrels look like they've seen some things. Let me put it that way. But like once again, they're gorgeous, and they were all quite wet, meaning once again we were able to pull a couple liters out of each cask before we were to fill them with bourbon. So a lot of times when I get wet barrels, I really like a mix of wet and dry, to be honest, because you get totally different. You get more oxidative profiles as the dry ones, and you get more like sweet, fruity, those heavier dark fruits in particular out of wet barrels. And these ones are all wet, but what we'll do is we don't put the bourbon directly in it. It's too much. I mean, honestly, it's just basically like dumping a bunch of port in bourbon, and it just doesn't work right.
Yeah.
So we dump all that out. We usually wait a couple weeks to a month or so. A little bit of the drying happens in our warehouse, and then we fill them with our bourbon. That's all intentional. That is truly the difference between just dropping some stuff in your glass with whiskey in it and putting it through a barrel. You end up with oxidative qualities and textural qualities that you don't get without doing that. Which is a lead into why we don't do stave finishing either. That's just a personal thing. I know there are some people that have impressed me, don't get me wrong, but I just don't think stave finishing is quite up our alley and what we're looking for. We don't get the textural elements and flavors that we're looking for out of that.
So when you say stave finishing, are you talking about like shaving and recharring kind of thing, or
meaning more often than not, people will put like pieces of a stave or oak into the barrel, and
so
or
like the Maker's 46?
Yeah. Honestly, I don't know. You all can judge me on this one, but part of my hair looks like I've been drinking all day. I promise you, I haven't. What happens when you wear a beanie all day? Maker's 46, I thought actually did probably one of the best jobs out that I've ever tasted, as far as a stave finish. And I by no means tasted that, all of them. But so far it's just not a profile that I prefer at all. We don't do chips, we don't do staves, nothing with cutting corners in that regard, no special aging techniques other than how we treat our barrels, where we put them in the warehouse. And of course, where we source our barrels, that's really what we have on our side that we're looking for. Don't get me wrong, sometimes I put them really high in our warehouse because it's a little bit warmer. Sometimes I put them low because it's a bit cooler. But ultimately, I think there's a lot of methods behind the madness here that have been proven for 100+ years, and I like to lean on those.
Nice. I just went back and tried the L'Esprit again, the Cognac cask finish, and it's full on French toast on the nose for me right now.
Yeah.
French toast.
Mhm.
Mm.
Well, let's go on to the KWM cask because this is a hell of a story. So for the end point of the story where we actually got the bottle, I wrote up a tasting note for it as soon as we got one cracked, and I went to Harmony right afterwards, and I was like, I'm kind of breathing a sigh of relief here because after all the stuff we sampled before trying the casks, I can't remember exactly why we picked this one and if it's actually good or not. And Harmony was like, yeah, me too. Like, did we actually pick a good cask? We were sweating it for like the last 6 or 7 months since trying it in June. And then it finally came end of December and it was like, oh yeah, this is a good cask. Thank goodness.
Yeah, and like especially the night before, I was really nervous before it landed. I was like, oh man,
Yeah.
I hope we did good.
Yeah. Is Andrew gonna hate us for this one?
Yeah.
But in all honesty, so when we tried these samples, there were 3 rye casks and 3 bourbon casks that were lined up for us to try that you guys had selected. And there wasn't a bad one in the bunch. So it was almost just trying to pick the flavor profile that we wanted to lean into. It was a ton of fun, but we could have picked all 6 at that point, given how many whiskeys we tried before that, I guess.
I remember that. I mean, in every one of those casks, we pre-pick our barrels what we think.
I know you
and
you kind of salted the mind there, yeah.
Yes, of course. But honestly, we picked more barrels for you all to taste because we knew you're all coming down and how excited y'all were. So I think our tasting of single barrels was the largest we've ever done. Let alone most people never come to us to do tasting. So thank you for making the trip. That was awesome. Thanks, Chief, for organizing that.
We know where you live now, so it's probably trouble for me running.
It's okay, I don't mind. Come over anytime. But there's quite a few casks in that, and we were doing bourbons and I think we picked through a bunch of ryes as well, if I remember.
Yeah, the ryes were awesome.
Yeah,
yeah.
Anyways, that was fun. I will say I actually got my phone to do the thing that I wanted to. So while you all are talking, I'll wander us through and give us a little tour.
Oh, that's awesome, man.
If you all want to do that, but this is the perfect one to, I think, do it on.
Are you logged in already on that phone?
Yeah, he is.
Yeah, it's just Jesse's iPhone down in the corner, maybe somewhere. I don't know how your video is.
I'll see if I can find that. No,
I got it.
I'll co-host you, and then we can. Yeah. So if you want to mute yourself on this one, and then it'll pick up the mic on the.
That's the problem.
There you
go. I got it. Oh.
Yes. Stay muted. Is it working?
We'll just wait for him to walk away.
Cool. There we go.
Yeah.
All right. Can you all see what's going on here?
Yeah, absolutely.
1 second. Sorry, all these lights are automatic and kind of ridiculous.
Oh, I know where he is now.
All right. So we're in the warehouse. The only problem is they're all automatic, so you have to go find them. There we go. The only thing is, see if I can turn off this darn background issue. Anyways, feel free to talk amongst yourself. I'll try and deal with these technical difficulties.
Yeah, so Thirst Responder Jay says nice mustiness to the KWM cask, and it does have this musty, starchy note to it. Like it's toasted. It's got a bit of chocolate note. There is again a really nice black tea note coming out for me as well, which I think is one of the things that really turns me on to like single cask bourbon, where you get the steeped side of things in there.
Definitely. Yeah.
Well, maybe I'll do a shout out to what Jesse said before about the back of the labels. The back of the label, the KWM one is pretty awesome.
Right on.
That's great.
I don't think I've actually read it yet. I should take a look at that.
Should I read it out?
Please.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right. This barrel was hand selected by a small group of epic people who found it just too good to pass up. If they couldn't say no, should you?
Nice.
Well done. It's really good.
Thanks. So it turns out I think Zoom won't let me not do this. Can you all see? Is this clear?
No.
No, the background's blurry.
It won't seemingly let me do it on my phone, turn off the background blur, which makes no sense. Does anybody know how to use this darn thing? I feel like it.
Oh, you might have to. Yeah, it's weird that it's not blurred on your other one. I'm not sure.
Yeah, the other one is not. That's my computer, but even if
Try
I go
clicking your
forward,
camera.
it won't do it.
Oh, shoot.
Yeah.
That's too bad. Well, I'll have to do it another time, maybe.
Maybe that's the best option. Well, for what it's worth, there's several hundred barrels behind me. What you can see.
Yeah, this is what Harmony and I were seeing at the end of the tasting, actually.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Here. That says Tawny on it. All right. Well, I apologize. I'll bring my MacBook next time. For some reason, I left it at home today.
Oh, good, man.
Hey, let me switch back over.
Yeah. No worries.
Mm.
Yeah, we were we did talk about our rye barrel, and maybe that'll happen in the future too, because rye is still something that just isn't quite getting the love it deserves on the whiskey side of things versus bourbon, because there are some stellar rye casks you guys have there too. So
I think Gene kept our sample. He's hoarding the rye.
So it's funny because I was going through all of our barrels today, and guess what barrel I came across? I know it's there. I just hadn't come across it in a while. And it has all your names and signed on it.
yeah,
So we still have it. In fact, it'll be turning 8 here, I think in June.
cool.
So it'll be an 8-year-old. And is it good? Yes. I took a sneak peek. It's still damn tasty.
Nice.
I was doing a bunch of single barrel rye picks today or this morning, and I was like, oh, hey, there's Eminent Harmony's barrel. We got to check this one out again. So I kind of cracked into it a little bit and get a little taste. It's still wonderful. So we'll hold on to it for a little while.
Yeah.
You could retaste it and still see if you feel like it's what you're looking for. I remember it being particularly distinctive when we were talking about it, because I think we had 3 ryes or so, ryes that were just like, yeah, totally.
It's right here, Jess.
Nice. Oh my gosh, that's great, because I don't think I have a sample of it from when we tasted it. So hold on to that, because we should do a comparison with what it tastes now. So
Definitely.
Yeah. It's the should I tell you what the name is on it?
Say that again.
We called it
we named it.
I remember Dutch licorice.
Oh, that was it.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, it was Dutch licorice, because it takes those Dutch licorice pills.
Totally.
Yeah, I think that's on the barrel. It's just a little hard to read anymore. That's so funny. Anyways, I'll crack this bottle of bourbon open too. This was an excellent bourbon choice. And for those of you who pick up a bottle of Doc Swinson's and you get this fancy wax on top and it doesn't come with a pull tab and you start worrying if we forgot to put it on, I always like to reiterate, you don't need one. All you have to do is grab the cork, give it a little twist. It literally pops open. So we get that comment all the time, like, you forgot, your QC forgot to put the tear strip on. And we're like, no, we didn't. This is just weird wax that nobody else uses.
It's awesome.
So we do, I think we talked about this when we were down there, and I was trying to get your source for your wax for a while, because we make whiskey calendars, and we were talking about doing wax tops for a while. And then we went with a sticker, which was just going to be a hell of a lot less time for doing tens of thousands of bottles, essentially.
Honestly, you're smart.
But I love the wax that you guys have, that you guys use on your bottle tops.
I just dropped the ball on that. I apologize. I'm happy to share the contact with you.
Yeah, no worries.
But
even the little blue samples on your sample kits, you have the little blue wax. So smart.
It's honestly just a leftover wax from all that 15-year, because we did the 15-year in blue wax.
Right.
You just have hundreds of pounds of it left over. So we're like, might as well use it somewhere.
Jesse, from your guys' perspective, when you pull casks for people to try for barrel picks, essentially, what are you guys looking for specifically?
So here's the thing that I've actually been kind of exploring more recently with doing like smaller batch custom blends with groups. So like 3 barrels kind of thing, 2 barrels, stuff like that. And it's something that's rattled in my head from back when I first started getting asked to do single barrels as well. And so there's a couple key things that I want to focus on when offering single barrels, to your point. One of them is does it fit in line with Doc Swinson's brand? I don't want to put something out there that doesn't fit in line with our brand or so different just because the client necessarily wants it. I don't think that's what we want to do with our brand. So it still needs to fit in with Doc Swinson's brand. 2, it is okay to remember that harebrained ideas are not bad usually. They can be, but not bad. What I mean by that is sometimes we do come across single barrels that are so outside of what you would expect from them, but they still fit into our brand identity because that kind of is part of our brand idea to some degree. That we like to occasionally throw 1 or 2 of those ringers in there because we're curious about who you are. And sometimes that's the coolest thing to showcase. So for example, one of the first single barrels I ever did and ever released, this was actually in 2018. Strangely enough, and I don't think I would necessarily do this again, but this is before we really built our brand. It literally just tastes like an extra añejo tequila. It was a 12-year-old bourbon though.
Crazy.
That was kind of unique. In those rare occasions, we'll offer, we'll find one of those and chuck them in if we have them. But most of the time, we wanted still to fit in with our brand, which oftentimes more often than not, I should say, usually is a higher proof product that is also quite smooth and unassuming in a way that is off-putting. We don't want it to be. We don't just want to pick a bunch of samples, send them to you, and then rely entirely on, and no offense, but we don't want to entirely rely on people always picking them because sometimes people don't know what to pick. And it is our name, after all, also on the bottle. So it needs to fit within those parameters. And most of the time that is something that's approachable and it's exciting and it has textural elements that fit in line with the rest of Doc Swinson's.
No, that's cool. And I've dealt with a couple bourbon producers where we've turned down stuff where it seemed like it was just like, well, this was easy to access in the Rick House kind of thing. And there wasn't a lot of character. And I think that was the worst thing that you can say about a bourbon, especially is like when I try a bourbon and have a bourbon that I want to enjoy, I want something that has a lot of character to it. I like the smoothness and stuff like that, but I'm not looking for something that's just going to be like, oh yeah, it's bourbon kind of thing. Right. And for us, there's this also this weird combination of we have to really like it, but we also have to be able to sell it. Yeah. And I have some weird tendencies as people are aware of on what I like on the Scotch side of things, and sometimes bourbon side of things as well. But that's why it was cool to have Harmony there too. This is actually much more her pick than mine, in my opinion. She did the heavy lifting on picking this one, and I was just went back and tasted it and said, like, yeah, I totally agree.
Yeah, I found it just so approachable, yet layers of flavor. And if you pour a nice big pour of it, like, I mean, if you do a half ounce, it's just not going to last long. But you do a half ounce, like it's just gonna open up and develop as it sits in the glass. And it's a fantastic bourbon. And I'm really happy to have your name and our name on this bottle.
Yeah. And that's exactly it. That's the narrative. That's the story, right? We want to showcase that we give a shit and you give a shit. That's why we put our names on these things. And absolutely, that's integral to the brand and our existence. The worst thing we could do is give you a barrel that, that you pick and maybe you don't pick, not saying you, but, somebody else, and they can't sell it. That looks bad for them. That looks bad for us. The clients don't like it. That's nothing that we want. But I also think that the other part of single barrels is it has to be interesting enough to warrant being a single barrel, right? To your point, it needs to have the characteristics you specifically are looking for. They're supposed to be special barrels, not just your run of the mill. Because we have plenty of run of the mill barrels that are just really pretty standard, bourbon, MGP profile bourbons. And that's where the point is they make the base up of all of our, blends. And that's what they're really good for. But there's these ones out here that, just make you feel a little bit more special, and that is definitely the point.
Yeah, absolutely.
And this was excellent. Oh my gosh, I haven't tried this since we tasted it, to be honest with you. So,
I know, it's fantastic.
And luckily, my crew gave me a couple bottles of it, so I actually have maybe 3 of these in my library.
Nice.
It's rare for single barrels. Usually, I only keep like 1 or a half of one because that's what they ended up giving me. So I'm stoked. I went there today and I was like, wait, I've got 3 of these. Nice. And
No,
you're right, Harmony. This keeps evolving.
yeah.
Yeah.
There's like,
Well, I gotta say, like, thanks Harmony for picking this one, and thanks Jesse, and thank you Gene for making this all happen too, because it was a fun trip. It was short, but it was full of fun and full of making new friends and just having a great time. And not all trips end up like that when you go on these whirlwind tours. So it was super refreshing.
Yeah, we're definitely not an exit through the gift shop kind of company. As you
No,
can tell
it's-
by our very curated tasting tonight.
I know.
my
We
tour.
could have used a gift shop actually at the end of it because we wanted more
Oh.
swag.
I'm sorry. Honestly, I think you have the last of the hats.
I know.
yeah, we do.
Yeah, it's keep in mind we focus on the whiskey, and maybe that's where we're
Yep.
bad marketers, but the point is what's in the bottle and the people we get to meet, and that's the coolest experience I could ask for. So maybe one day we'll try and get some more swag, and maybe next time you come we'll have a gift shop
That's right.
consisting of at least some stickers.
That's right.
Listen, are
That's
you
right.
kidding? It was the best. It was one of the best 24-hour whirlwinds, as Evan says.
Yeah.
Experience to go down there, and the mere fact that you guys spent the entire day with us
Oh my gosh, yeah.
was really, second to none.
Yeah.
And that's something I've always been, emphasizing on. People can get samples sent to them all the time. Nothing beats the experience of being on premise and picking that sample yourself
Totally.
and experiencing, the people, the people that you're working with and partnering with, and all the passion they have behind their products, just took it to a whole nother level. And
Yeah.
yeah, knock on wood, it was a good, smooth journey.
Yeah.
And yeah, we had some good times there. Lots of drinks, that's for sure.
Yeah.
We did.
Yeah. It's not often that we hang out with people after doing
Yeah.
the tour and everything, and then like I find another guy has a great daughter named Isla, which was cool too.
Yeah.
So
Yep. Yeah.
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 Spelled the same way.
Yep.
For me, it was
Nice.
like I'd never seen the ocean. So to go sit on
Right.
the coast, eat, freshly farmed oysters, watch the tide
Yeah.
roll in, watch the sunset, and then, send off with a good pat on the head from Mr. Pickles, the dog, and just like carry on. Like, I'll never forget that.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm glad we had that kind of impression on you. I know. I always feel. I'll be honest. Sometimes I feel like we don't have as much to offer as like some of the large distilleries because we're not distilling it, right? And we have a good sized warehouse, but it's only 16,000 square feet, and like a chunk of that's offices and shipping and it's funny. Sometimes I'm like, oh, do people want to come all the way over here? You know what? The reality is some people do, and those are the people that are
Yep.
special to us. So we want to show you a good time here. We want to show you what we do, the passion that we have. We want to show you the area because that all has influence over the production. Right? I mean, whether it's even
Oh.
less scientific side, it has influence over the production.
And
I
I
Well,
remember
it's-
the day we
yeah.
were there too, you were bottling a new bourbon, a lower
Yes.
ABV core that no one else had ever tried with
Yeah.
the blue label. And you're like, oh, hey, just try this off
Yeah.
the line. Like that was pretty cool.
That's that session blend I was talking about, which for the record, we
Yeah.
got to get up there because it is, if it's not already, Gene, pardon me, I'm not always the best at remembering.
No,
where
no.
it goes, but it is
Yeah.
so good. We
Yeah.
do blind
Cool.
tastings all over the country in bars, and we'll beat like Four Roses small batch, which is one of my favorite things.
Mhm.
Even Old Forester 100, which I think is like the hardest thing in the world to beat when it comes to bar pricing and quality. And I'm like, yes. And we'll get turned into
Very
like
cool.
the cocktail menu of choice, bourbon. I'm like, that's what I want. So it was a different exercise in blending than I haven't done for Doc Swinson before. So once again, to reiterate, all these products have a lot of different processes. Most of what we tried tonight was blenders cut, aged in different finishing casks, which is the most logical way to produce it. But if we start talking about rye whiskeys and several of my other finished whiskeys, bourbons, it's a completely different avenue. I'll age each mash bill separately. I'll age different ones in different types of casks and
Cool.
put them together later. So there's a lot of different process methods behind each release. And that's actually honestly not a terrible segue into the next one. If I don't know if we're ready for
Yeah, I
it.
was gonna say, like, I've just been nosing Funky Drummer in the background here, and it is like a massive gear shift versus the bourbons we've just had.
That's why when you all reached out and said, "Is there a good order you think we should go?" And I was like,
Yeah.
Steve, you want to do this one? Because I'll be honest, I put so many orders together recently. I'm like, I'm not sure. This is quite an interesting lineup.
Yeah.
Not to mention 7 whiskeys. I don't usually do 7 in one whack, so kudos. And I was like, Funky Drummer, we got one rye on there. Let's put that one at the end here. So Funky Drummer is going to be our dessert pour tonight. And Funky Drummer, so for the record, I love rums. I used to blend a lot of rums, like I think I said at the beginning of this. And I still blend a couple here and there. And Jamaican rum is just one of those ones that's so far out there and unique because oftentimes it's used as top noters in the rum industry to give Spanish style rums a little extra flair. You know, maybe it's coffee or passion fruit or whatever as far as a top note. Or it's used in the perfume industry, or it's used in the flavor industry. It's used in so many different industries. It's just one of those strange anomalies. And funky is a common note that is talked about in rum, right? It's a common descriptor of Jamaican rums.
Yeah.
For really obvious reasons if you've tried any Jamaican rums. And I wanted to capitalize on that in a way that would be fun. So I paired two rye whiskeys together and aged them in these Jamaican rum casks that were also approximately 20. The casks were used for 20 years. I couldn't tell you exactly if they're 20-year-old Jamaican rums because if you've ever talked to a Jamaican rum distillery or most rum distilleries, they'll say it's a barrel. What else do you want to know? More often than not, it's gone through several barrels and several refills. This was an older set of rums, probably between 8 and 10 years old, though, would be my guess based on what came out of them. But that's just my guess here. But it was rye whiskey finished in these Jamaican rum casks for several months. I think I want to say this one was this release maybe about 7.5 months or 6.5 months. You could look up all these release information on our website for the record. So if you're ever really curious, grab a bottle, look at the release number, go to our website, and you generally, as long as we've had time to do it, we'll put in how long, what type of cast, what size of cast, and everything. But
there is so much Jamaica on this bottle. So like it is so like dunder heavy, which is very, very cool. Like it's marzipan all over the place and like overripe bananas and even some pineapple notes in there. It's just crazy.
I get like a very overripe pear.
Yeah.
It's like so soft. You might as well just eat the core.
Yeah, almost it kind of tight ropes across going into acetone notes. Like doesn't quite get it there, but it's going there.
Let me say this is one of the first releases, not this particular release, but the first time I ever made this product, I never released it because it went too far into the acetone qualities. It's one of those ones where I pushed the boundaries further than I should have. Those barrels are still aging in my warehouse.
Nice.
I don't know if we ever got to try those when you were around, but they're like way up on a top rick, so they get like a lot of nice heat from the heaters during the winter. And they're like 9 years old or something now.
Road trip.
Yeah, honestly,
that's right.
They've developed and evolved into something a little bit more approachable, exciting, but they're strange. So maybe one day we'll put out a funkiest drummer or something. But I went back to the drawing board with this one, redid it, and decided that it's a slightly different blend of the 2 rye whiskeys, and finished for a little bit shorter of a time frame than the first round. And I thought it was far better. So
cool.
There's an example of not really a mistake, just a learning experience. I don't have a lot of them playing that way, but this was one of them.
Well, this like I don't have synesthesia or anything, but this just reminds me of one of my favorite albums of all time. I got into listening to the Chemical Brothers when I was a teenager, and it just reminds me of listening to Dig Your Own Hole, where it's like grungy and crazy and dirty, but still kind of like has this math to it at the same time. but is just it's driven in what it does, and that's what this rye is as well.
That's awesome. I love that. That's a great painting of a picture. I think it when you said that, it honestly reminded me of I'm a big Hunter S. Thompson fan.
Oh yeah, me too.
And
Yeah.
Ralph Steadman, who did a lot of his artwork. This kind of reminds me of The Curse of Lono, the book, oddly enough.
Yep.
Which is where a lot of these kind of names come from, is just to your point. Exactly this is something that reminds you of something. And
have you ever seen Ralph Steadman's Scotch whiskey books?
I
Yeah,
have.
they're fantastic.
They're so cool. Anyways, that your description just reminded me of that. I'm like, oh man, I missed an opportunity there. I should have named it after something out of Ralph's, one of Ralph Steadman's things, or Hunter S. Thompson.
That's right.
Books. And next time.
This is one of those I kind of wish I had ordered more, because I know Harmony was, the moment she got one, within 24 hours or so, and I don't think I'm probably exaggerating by much, she goes, I need another one. You're like, I think I only brought in like a half a dozen cases for that very reason. And it was like, wow. So, and I think you got the last case, Harmony, too.
Yeah,
if I'm not mistaken. Yeah,
and I think you got the last of our cases from our warehouse.
That's
too,
correct.
To be honest, because I only made 8. I've released it twice, and so in total, I believe we did. It was either 10 or 12 barrels in total between both releases together. So it was not a lot. I have some potential good news. I'll spread because I want it to come to fruition. I might be getting more Jamaican rum casks.
Cool.
There we go.
So from a similar producer, let's say.
On that note, just because I want to ask this, just because I saw this come up in another cask or single cask I tried of Scotch. Have you ever gotten rum casks that are ex-Cognac French oak?
No, and I would love to. I'm a huge French oak nut.
Yeah.
But no, I haven't. Everything I've had so far has been, honestly, it doesn't really matter. Jack Daniels. They've all been Jack barrels. But then go. So you could probably trace where that chain of custody goes and figure out where these barrels came from pretty easily. I just can't say it, but like I said, there's
I don't know if there's
I can't be forward about, and it's just because usually I have NDAs or relationships that ask me not to. Otherwise, we'll tell you. But
there's one cognac producer that does at least one cognac producer that does release a lot of rum. Cognac Ferrand. I don't know if they're
doesn't ring a bell. They're small, right?
Yeah, super tiny.
There's been talk, but we'll see. We'll see what happens. Who knows? I'm just really excited to get more Jamaican rum barrels because, to be honest with you, it's one of those things that Jamaican rum barrels tend to be. They're not very expensive, but they're really hard to get, and that's primarily because the quality is so low. When those casks are sent abroad, by the time they say they're done with them, generally they're so incredibly low in quality that they won't hold liquid.
Yeah.
So the fail rate is significant. For example, the next highest fail rate that I've ever encountered would be the sherry industry. And that's mostly because I'm working with butts, so 500-liter casks that are, once again, 30, 40 plus old. So they start falling apart, and they're generally not taken care of particularly well anymore. But they produce excellent product if you're willing to baby them. Now the opposition to that is cognac casks that are gorgeous, and it doesn't matter how old they are perfect every time I get them, which is pretty wild. So it doesn't matter their age, it seems like. It's just
crazy.
Depends on where you get them from. In Jamaican rum casks, most people won't even consider bringing them in, so it's hard. It's hard to get those things.
Yeah, kind of makes sense.
Yeah. But my gosh, they're good.
What do you do, Jesse, if you get a really leaky cask? Is it just like you shrug your shoulder and say la vie, or do you have a program to fix that?
We have a program to fix that. That's a great question there, Harmony. We have a program. That is a self-taught program. I started coopering barrels when I was 21 to try and save barrels because I worked for a small distillery that didn't have a lot of money. And also, small company here, we have more money, but honestly, like it's a good challenge, and I think it's a fun thing to do, is understand more about how the barrel actually comes together and be able to fix them. So we often do get a barrel or two. Usually like 5 to 10% of barrels that we receive will have some sort of leaking issue. And in general, we'll fix probably about 90% of those barrels. Every once in a while, we get one that's so far gone that, and oftentimes it's because it's leaking through the staves. So something beyond our capabilities to fix, and likely would be kicked out of the door regardless of who's got it, even if it's a cooperage. So we work on our barrels. It's between Garrett and I now. He does most of them now. Once upon a time, that was also entirely my job. And it was just because of a challenge. I was just curious. I like getting my hands dirty, and I like getting into everything that I do and understanding as best as I can. So for example, like I even triple cask is actually aged or married together in these Cognac foeders. I think y'all saw those when you were here. And they're about the size of a small SUV, or maybe a little bigger than a Mini Cooper. And all those casks I got from a Cognac producer, and to be fair, they did not show up in the best condition, and they leaked like sieves, and we were able to save all of them. And saving a barrel that's, 2,000-3,000 liters is not the easiest task to do, I can tell you that.
No doubt.
But it's a fun challenge, and why not? It's incredibly useful skills to have. I don't think I could build a barrel from scratch, though. That is beyond me.
I mean, I think you have to go through a 4-year apprenticeship before you get that honor.
That's right.
Something like
That's
that.
right.
Yeah.
Well, I did try and get a poll together, but unfortunately it's not allowing me to launch because it's saying it's not saved, sadly. So if you guys want to pipe in what your 2 favorites are, feel free. I'm just actually going back in the lineup order just for fun right now. And after doing the Funky Drummer, our KWM cask is just so chocolatey. Like it's just like milk chocolate, baking chocolate. It's just all over the place.
My sample wasn't big enough.
I know. I'm nosing like what's probably mostly saliva at this point, honestly.
I mean, I have a bottle in the living room, but
You gotta crack that bottle open.
Yeah.
We call that texture, Evan.
That's right. That's right.
It's funny. Do you ever find, like, I don't know if you all come across this, but there's a couple, for the record, if you haven't noticed, I don't talk about flavor notes very often. And there's a reason. One, because I want to hear what you all think in the reality. You all have important palates, and you all taste things differently than I do. And it's good to hear you all talk about it. I think that was something that was taught to me when I was young. I had the privilege of knowing a Grand Sommelier when I was a teenager, basically. And essentially what she told me was, you need to trust your palate and go into it. And if you say it first, more than likely people will follow suit. Doesn't mean they always agree. Don't lie, but just be honest and actually talk about it, because that's going to help you build that that vocabulary, right? And I still have to say, Harney and Evan, you two have the best vocabulary for tasting I've ever encountered in this entire industry, which truly impresses me to no end every single time. I wish I had it. It's not my talent in this world. My talent might be playing with the whiskeys, but it's certainly not writing about them or discussing them in this manner. So I thank you for that. That is really cool. Seriously.
Oh, thanks, man. That's truly high praise. Maybe unjustified praise, but I appreciate it nonetheless. I've talked about this, and I think that maybe, well, actually, Harmony, you go first. I don't want to take over here.
Well, I don't, about what? I have nothing left in many of my glasses. Going back to the first one, it's like fruit leather spread on leather.
Mm-hmm.
And it's so good. Nice, soft, chewy leather with a fruity undertone. The second one, it's all honey all day, like honey and icing and sponge cake, and it's just like beautiful to nose. The third one is like heavier and denser and way more chocolate than I remember, but also remember saying dark chocolate, but it's just more-ish.
Yeah, the third one's still French toast to me.
Yeah, that's the l'Esprit, which
Oh, my glasses are mixed up. Yeah.
we did we actually, it's funny because when you say French toast, we actually did a French toasted release, which is my
Yep.
French cask. So it's the first time I ever did a virgin cask. I did that one with Garyana actually. So woohoo, I'm so happy you guys remember that one. That was awesome. But the Cognac casks still exhibit a fair amount of that quality from the French oak, which I really appreciate. There's something magical about it, and most of my French oak is also Quercus petraea. So the other French oak, as I like to call it, but most people associate French oak with Quercus robur or Limousin oak. I use Quercus petraea, so also known as English oak or Cecil. There's too many names. But it tends to have a little bit more minerality, and they tend to be they're tight grained versus wide grained. So, which one day we got to talk about grains, my friend. It's my other obsession.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. It seems like there's a big toss up in the chat over favorites.
Oh,
but
yeah.
your Tawny Port, it seems to be getting quite a few honorable mentions, if not the first favorite. You know, best Tawny I've ever had. Tawny 1, Tawny 2. Tawny's truly delicious. I agree. The L'Esprit and the Funky Drummer also coming out ahead in the polls. A few KWM picks. I'll second that. I'm a big fan of our KWM, and probably the L'Esprit because I drank mine really fast and I don't have any left. So that speaks for me. Not just the sample, but the bottle I bought when it was released. Those would be my two favorite. What about you, Evan?
It's a toughie.
It is tough. I like the funky
Probably
drummer.
probably the Tawny and the KWM cask, although I'd take any of these any day of the week. The Funky Drummer is just like it's almost in its own section
Yeah.
for on the list because it is so different, which makes it so much fun. I gotta say I'm super impressed and thankful for all the KWM cask votes, because having a naked cask essentially versus the cask finishes, and to have people pick it a favorite is pretty impressive. But yeah, it's just a Harmony. I'm so thankful you kept these bottles back and we didn't sell them to people, because it made for one hell of a tasting.
Well, I knew we were gonna have. I mean, even if we didn't get a Doc Swinson's pick, I knew they were special. And
Yeah.
part of me is like, I mean, Jean, you too, like pat yourself on the back, like you got the award for best blender just very recently, best bourbon blender. And I was like, yes, we picked our barrel before this happened. Like now the world knows, but we were on top of it first.
Yeah. Hey, and kudos to G&T, because Gene found us when we were still rocking those like first maybe 40 barrels we ever did. Like honestly, like I think you were the one of the first names I ever heard Steve say, who's like really interested in what we have to do. And so thank you for that. That's been seriously, that's cool. And you stuck with us and been by our side for this entire time. So you've seen the beginning.
Yep, I have. And I wouldn't have changed it for the world. It's been part of my whole, just the hobby and the passion that I've had before I really got into this business. One of my key elements was really to introduce Canadians, American whiskeys that were different and not products that were made for the masses. So I'm a huge, quote unquote craft guy in the sense people need to open their horizons a lot more and taste different things to truly understand what is out there. So yeah, we've been sometimes coined as the kind of the hockey scouts of bourbon as of late. And that's what we do. We really go out there and, yeah, you got to have a good product, but there's also a fit and a relationship when you're building partnerships. And we love, and you guys know, I tell you that all the time. I don't need to blow smoke anywhere. We absolutely love Doc, and Canadians absolutely love Doc as well. And that's why, we've been doing what we've been doing, partnering with you guys and growing your brand, and especially with KWM to come and pick the very first Canadian barrel pick for Doc. That's huge. I can't tell you how many, you know, other retailers had blown up my phone after the fact. And I'm going, you snooze, you lose. You got to stay on top of things. You know, that's just how it goes.
I mean,
But I'm so happy that it's all worked out for everybody. So I thank you guys all as well.
I mean, absolutely. I mean, what to reiterate once again, I mean, you two or you three, but really, Evan and Harmony, you two were probably, I think you were the second people that have ever come to do a personal in-pick barrel. We've only had one other, and it was a whiskey group out of Texas. They're I think the first ones, and y'all were the second people to ever come to Doc Swinson's. We call it Doclandia, but yeah, you're the first people to ever come here, or second people to ever come here, which is really cool. First international people. There we go. You got that title too, which is super cool because a lot of people they love our brand, but you know, most people just want samples, which is great. I get it. I understand it's expensive to show up, but you know,
we came for the
journey.
samples and we stayed for the store pick is what we did.
Absolutely.
Yeah, that store pick is absolutely epic. I'm so stoked I have a couple extra bottles because we don't do that many single barrels. I think we did maybe 40 of them in total for North America last year, which isn't like necessarily a super small number by any means, but it's not big. And you don't come across ones that you want to go back to over and over again all the time either. So cheers. Well done.
Cheers to you, Jesse.
Yeah. Oh, gosh.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
I poured myself a second Kensington Wine Market, so.
Awesome. Yeah. Well,
and you didn't just pick it on proof. Thank you so much. You actually did it on flavor. You know how many times we get say, just give me the highest proof, and I'm like, no, we won't. No. So we used to just not put it on the bottles we send out. We do a little bit more now because people got a little weird about it. But so sales team, thanks. But you picked it based on profile because this is a 111.7 proof. Which is a lower proof, and a lot of people who are really interested in single barrels want those really high proof points, which are great sometimes. But honestly, these lower proofs for single barrels tend to be my favorite ones personally. And I think that's a cool thing to showcase that we all align over quality whiskey, and that's what matters.
Absolutely. Yeah. Well, we should wrap this up this time. We could go on for another hour, I'm sure, and just chat away because this was my favorite part about being down there, Jesse, is that just us as a group, you, Steve, Harmony, Gene, and I just seem to just become fast friends really quickly.
Absolutely. Next time you all come here, we'll have to do a live tasting version, and I'll figure out how to do the camera so we can all
that'd be cool.
That'd be really cool. It'd be fun to shoot.
Yeah, we'll definitely have to come down again sometime soon because it was a ton of fun, and it's been fun to share sort of the Doc Swinson's experience with everybody too, because whenever we talk about it at the shop, we can't keep the smile off our faces when we talk about our time down there. So
that's awesome to hear.
Yeah.
And thank you all for joining too, for the record. Yeah. It's honestly awesome to see this many little windows pop up. So, and good comments.
Well, I'll give a shout out to Gene getting this to Canada via two main retailers up here, I think, and I found it for another one first, but KWM sort of probably taken over a little bit. But when Gene finds these little nuggets, Jesse's doing awesome, I tell you. And I'm not a number one. Rye's not my number one, but I'll buy all your ryes.
Yes.
Like. It's not, rye is not my go-to at all. It's Scotch and bourbons, but your ryes, I will buy them. Like it's awesome. Yeah. And literally, there's probably 6 bottles behind me, and a few are there in the back room. Like, yeah.
Hey,
there's a couple of buddies that we are Doc Swinson fanboys, and we pick them up, we share them, we have a good time.
Thank you. I mean, your support helps our brand. In the end, I can't drink this much whiskey. I'll tell you that.
I can't either. You gotta share it.
It doesn't matter how hard we try.
Gotta share it. Yeah, gotta share it.
Right on. Well, that's it. And on that note, thank you again, Gene and Jesse. Gene for bringing this to our attention, and Harmony again for bringing it to everybody's attention as well. It's been a great working with you. Yeah, go ahead,
Evan. I just want to ask one thing: is how many of these bottles are available? Are any of them?
Good question. I think we still have probably about 160 or 170 or so, I believe, to still come in.
Yeah.
So we've got a good supply.
We had a sale on the weekend. We sold out of Doc. Pre-order online if you want the Blender's Cut, Pain de Chance, Lament Bourbon. We do have opportunities to get their new Toasted Oak and their Tres Amigo Rye, which is a rum and tequila finish. If you're interested in any of those, please email me. If you're interested in all of those, email me. We also have the Garyana Oak that's available and coming in soon, not this week, but hopefully next week. So if you're interested in anything, just email us, or you can place a pre-order on our website.
Okay, sounds good.
Perfect.
Thanks, Harmony. Jesse, you're doing great stuff there. Let me tell you, you've converted. I'm the Harmony's friend that worked at the store that thinks all bourbon tastes the same, but not Doc Swinson's. So
Hey,
I think
that's
your
a
stuff
huge
is
compliment.
fantastic. I have a friend who I've been trying to convert to a whiskey drinker for 30 years, and Doc Swinson's is the brand that's done it.
Yes.
So great. You're doing a great job.
I mean, thank you. Honestly, that is a true. I mean, anything like that. That's the idea, right? How do I get more people involved in American whiskey in a way that they'll enjoy it? I mean, and this is my answer to that. Especially ryes. Once again, I'm a huge rye nut. That was the first American whiskeys that I fell in love with, and rye needs a lot more love. I think, Evan, you were talking about that earlier. Rye doesn't get the love.
It totally does.
Drop the connotation. Drop the connotation what rye is and say, I'm willing to try it. And you could start with Doc Swinson's. I bet you won't be disappointed. You might be disappointed with some other ones. I don't know. But I bet you'd like what we make. We have a big reputation for rye. And most people don't know how to work with rye is what I've realized over the years. So
absolutely. Well, we will be carrying whatever we can from Doc Swinson's as we have and going forward, and look forward to seeing what else you come up with, Jesse.
Yeah, thank you so much. Also, anytime any of you are in the area, shoot us an email. Our phone number doesn't work, so don't call it. Shoot us the email. Or get in contact with these folks, and they'll set you up with me, and you come tour the place and whatnot. It's cool. So
sounds good. Well, thank you all for joining us on this tasting, and we will do it again soon. Cheers, everybody. Take care.
Thank you.
Thanks, Jesse.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, Jean.
Thank you, guys.